Season 3 of Fortnite Chapter 2 is here, and with more answers, it feels like we now only have more questions than ever. Is Midas dead? What is Jules the Engineer up to? Where are the Seven? And is Fortnite all just a simulation? Today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking another deep dive into the storyline and explaining in full everything that has been happening within the world. Chapter 2 of Fortnite has been incredibly complicated, but we're excited to finally reveal the shocking truth to Season 2's finale. Before we get into it, we are really close to 3 million subscribers, and this might be the video to help push us there, so it would be really appreciated if you would subscribe. Also, we'll be explaining the rules for the giveaway at the end of this video, so make sure to watch all the way through, as it really helps us with the algorithm. Anyways though, let's do this. In case you haven't seen the first episode or need a refresh, here's a quick recap to catch us up where we left off in Season 10. In Chapter 1, Season 3, a meteor crashes to Earth, spewing interdimensional energy rocks over the Battle Royale island. In the remains of the meteorite, an alien entity known as the Visitor emerges. Then a secret group named Organization X works to harness the power of the Hop Rocks, creating a rocket in hopes to destroy the island. At the last moment, the Visitor hijacks it and uses the Hop Rock energy to send him and the rockets to a quantum realm of nothingness known as the In-Between. But the rift doesn't close behind him, and a giant cube travels from another dimension into ours. The cube tries to go after something below Loot Lake, but fails. Then an ancient Ice King attempts the same thing. Ultimately, his giant pet monster escapes his control and also tries to attack it. What they'd all been going after was the Vault, an interdimensional nexus hub which connects every universe. And inside it exists Nexus Spheres, incredibly powerful energy that literally keeps the fabric of the multiverse stable. An entity from this dimension known as Singularity then creates a robot on our island to defend the Vault and kills the monster at the cost of the stability of a Nexus Sphere. The sphere then explodes and takes us to where we left off in the last video. On August 1st, 2019, Season 10 of Fortnite began, and with it, the 0 Point Sphere exploded, warping realities and altering the island to its core. In a brief moment, we were able to see this happening through the perspective of Jonesy as he floated through interdimensional limbo until he was sucked back to his world. Except the world as he knew it was no longer his. See, that was not the Chapter 1 to 9 island at all, but in fact something entirely different. Lurking beyond what we knew at the time was an infinite number of alternate timelines within the Fortnite multiverse. And there were 6 other timelines which very closely resembled the one we called the Chapter 1 Battle Royale Island. In those alternate timelines, the exact same events played out. A meteor struck the island and a rocket would eventually go off, rifted out by different timeline versions of the Visitor. In one timeline, choose who we call the Paradigm, and in another, who we call the Scientist. In truth, these entities are all Visitors. They are the same figure, just alternate timeline versions. And together, they make up the Seven. So, the Nexus Sphere exploded, resulting in the 7 timelines basically pinching together to form what was the brand new Season 10 island. But in this moment, there were anomalies which caused time to pause. The Visitors, stuck in the in-between, caused the flow of time to short out and stop entirely. And so was the Scientist's meteor, floating above the Season 10 map, Capsule, Scientist, and all. Seeing the precarious balance our multiverse lay in, the Scientist emerged from his pod and set out to devise a plan which would contain the 0 Point Sphere and bring order to the timelines. Throughout Season 10, he went around the map creating 6 rift beacons, and these beacons would act similarly to the central vault, working to link the in-between and timelines via rifts to this world. The Scientist then constructed a rocket on the island and set a countdown to launch. And just like in Season 4, the rocket flew high up into the sky, but this time there were more. One by one, the 6 rift beacons activated, and through their portals came the other 6 rockets, each being manually controlled by an alternate timeline visitor, our original one included. These 6 rockets had been stuck there since Season 4, waiting for this very moment to come back to reality. It's also possible that in Season 4 they even intentionally rifted these rockets out, knowing that the 0 Point instability was inevitable. And it's hard to confirm that, but the thought of them biding their time waiting is really cool. So, the 7 work together to control the rockets to loop around the meteor, creating enough energy to make a rift big enough to move the meteor so that it would head towards the 0 points. First, a single rocket flies down straight into the 0 point sphere, and while we don't know for sure, this was probably the scientist. He knowingly plunged into assured death to weaken the bubble protecting the 0 point, a noble sacrifice for the preservation of the multiverse. But then, after this rocket's collision, a larger rift opened and the meteor came out of it. The 6 rockets and 6 other visitors then rode away and out of the dimension to safety, but the meteor flew straight down. It then collided with the orb, creating a black hole, effectively destroying our island and entire universe, but preserving the multiverse. The 0 point sphere was contained once more. So, Fortnite Chapter 1 ends with the destruction of the main island universe in order to save the collapse of every other timeline and the people of those dimensions. All of the 7 actually managed to survive, but their whereabouts are unknown. What we do know, however, is that they continued to operate behind the scenes after this. Because the black hole should have destroyed everything, and while it was the end of the island, some things remained. After a few hours, a message started to come out of the black hole saying, "I was not alone. There are others outside the loop. This was not calculated. The nothing is now inevitable." And so the first thing we can assume from this is that the scientist lived. To communicate, this person used numbers referenced to those old tape recordings which only the scientist would have known. And it also brings an awareness over the existence of another group. And lastly, we would come to learn that a few other things survived the collapse. The black hole worked as a wormhole, carrying the battle bus full of characters to another world. And where that battle bus ended up was none other than the Chapter 2 timeline. So, Chapter 2 of Fortnite begins with 4 individuals exploring this alternate timeline battle royale island. Their names are Journey, Turk, 8-Ball, and Ripley, and they are members of the group known as Ego. Now, while this island is of the same branch, it followed a significant different chain of events from ours. There was no visitor, meteor, or rocket here, but it's not completely different either. There are alternate versions of Pleasant Park, Salty Springs, and Retail Row. A cube, just like Kevin, exists on the map, but the residents of this island have managed to harness it, and they use it for power just like the residents of the Season 9 map used the vault. There's even a peculiar lake and island in the middle of the island, which oddly resembles Loot Lake. Maybe, just like with our original island, a vault and portal to the in-between exists underneath. Now, things at this point seem extremely complicated and confusing, but pieces of a message were sent by someone from Ego, which helps to set the stage for Chapter 2. Surprisingly, I haven't seen many people talk about this, so let's go over it. It reads, "The containment field has stabilized. The bridge is intact. The 7 succeeded. Our manipulations averted disaster. The 0 point is ours, and the plan can continue." Surprising is the sheer volume of matter resolved around the bridge. Extensive charting and analysis are required. Our best team has been scrambled and inserted. We expect resistance and similar embedded agents. We've been as quiet as possible, but the gaze of others may now be turned towards 0. A whole new world awaits. So this basically explains that the 7 succeeded in not only containing the 0 point, but then went on to help Ego secure it. And that there's also something in the new island that Ego hopes to secure or keep safe. Whatever it is, they have a plan. And it also makes mention of another group, which would come to be known as Alter. Now, before even Ego lands on the island, Alter begins working in the background towards their own sinister goals. Alter operations were founded on this new island by a character known as the Kaos Agent, but it makes sense that he would have ties to the secretive organization X from Chapter 1. While Alter was initially not known to have any members on the island beyond the Kaos Agent, he quickly made contact with several people from the Season 1 island and recruited them. Riptide, Hazard, Toxin, Sheik all arrived via the wormhole battle bus. That's right, those characters are actually from our original island and joined him immediately. Perhaps these were all Organization X agents. Also, Fusion, originally two entities merged by the collapse of the 0-point sphere, later joined the team as well. And so to procure weapons and cash, Alter initially starts a black market trade at Dirty Docks led by Riptide and Scratch. Now, Ego first makes contact to the island when Journey, Turk, 8-Ball, and Ripley crash land after their plane gets shot down by Alter. As they arrive, Turk receives the confirmation that the 0-point sphere has been secured. And the goal of this group is to set up and await a larger force unit invasion. Shortly after the first four arrive, 8-Ball, a skilled fighter, and Remedy, a medic, join up with the rest of the Ego team. Also, there is a loading screen which shows the creation of Ripley, which was released in the second week. This creates inconsistencies with the trailer, as Ripley was already with Ego in their original exploration. One potential explanation is that this loading screen shows the creation of Ripley from his original timeline, but it's more likely that Epic just threw him in the trailer to show him off and promote him for the Battle Pass. After all, Epic's gotta make those sales. So it seems to be canon that he actually only joined Ego a few weeks later after escaping from Slurpy Swamp. Now, after a few more weeks go by and more intelligence is gathered, Ego has an important meeting to discuss the realization that Alter variant timelines of themselves exist and are working against them. While all take this news hard, upon learning of his alter ego, 8-Ball, determined to prove himself as an elite fighter, sets out to hunt down and kill Scratch. Now, at this point, we finally start to see the two groups clash. The newly escaped Ripley avoids being hunted down by Toxin and Sludges with the help of Cameo at Frenzy Farm. The two narrowly manage to escape unharmed and undetected. Next, after tracking his whereabouts for days, 8-Ball finally confronts Scratch alone in Weeping Woods. In an epic battle, the two fight medieval style with swords, and while they were evenly matched in skill, 8-Ball, armed with the notion that good must prevail over evil, defeats Scratch. We can assume this because after this loading screen was released, over the following weeks, Scratch starts slowly becoming corrupted. The more players used him, the darker he got, until his whole body was covered in some sort of virus. The most likely explanation is that 8-Ball intentionally planted a virus on Scratch as a means to gain control over him to spy on Alter. Also, one more interesting thing to note is that as this fight took place, the Bushranger spied on them from afar. The Bushranger is part of a third group, which we would later come to know as the Agency. War ravages the island, and as tensions heighten between the two groups, the Kaos Agent and Toxin work to create a bigger army of Sludges. Tensions finally peak as Toxin and the newly formed Sludges assault Ego near the Hydro Dam. But despite being outnumbered, Ego avoids total annihilation as Cameo, Journey, Turk, Remedy, and Ripley take off in a speedboat and manage to barely get away. Now, as this war over the island raged, it's easy to get lost in the little details and not look at the bigger picture. So let's step back a second. The most important player of Season 1 is by far the Kaos Agent. Along with leading Alter, he had bigger projects going on as well. The Kaos Agent worked to make other new entities, such as Big Chuggus, a deceased ally revived for the power of Slurp Juice. He was also in control of the Cube at the Steamy Stacks power production. And he was even working on a project to control the storm itself. And while control of the storm didn't go as planned, he was able to at least affect the weather, covering the entire island in snow. The Storm King was another entity who appeared on the island. This was thought to be a Save the World character, and his existence here only further confirms the link between Save the World and Battle Royale. And it's just so mysterious how and why he showed up here. If anything, it adds significance to the central island. Was he perhaps after something that lay below this? Or maybe even he was sent here to protect it? But more important than anything was the presence of the third group, the Agency. As the war between Ego and Alter escalated, the Agency was sitting back, gaining knowledge in the shadows. They were biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment, and at the end of Season 1, their leader emerged. The house which sat above the central island saw weird changes. Items in the house became gold. The leader was preparing. How long he had been here, we have no idea. It's possible that this was his original timeline and that he had always lived here. It's also possible that he came here after the events of Chapter 1. Under the guidance of the Seven or Organization X, it's hard to say. And so Season 1 ends in a bit of a draw. There is no decisive victor between Ego and Alter, but instead, the battle only desolates the island. If there's any winner here this season, it's the Agency, who gains knowledge on both groups. Now, some time passes between Season 1 and 2, and a lot takes place during that time. Midas, the leader of the Agency, finally reveals himself. And he begins to put his plan in motion and makes contact with the losing Ego, promising to help them if they join his side. By providing his aid, this effectively makes him the leader of Ego, but the groups do still exist codependently. While not all members start working directly underneath him, he does recruit many. Midas's executive members include Journey, along with new characters including Tech, Sky, Brutus, Tiantina, Bushranger, Deadpool, and Meowscles, his personal bodyguard. It's also worth noting that Lynx had been working with Midas since all the way back in Season 7 of Chapter 1. If you look at her loading screen from that season, you can actually see a photo of Meowscles, confirming that Midas at least had contact with the C1 dimension. Who is this guy, and how does he know so much? But while Midas was making power moves, Alter wasn't going to be so quick to accept defeat. Alter creates a new special intelligence unit called Shadow and then sets up additional safe houses around the map. Learning of this specialized group of soldiers, Midas then creates his own special tactics units under Ego known as Ghost. He has a learning facility created above Weeping Woods, which would serve as a training base for Ghost henchmen. And just for clarification, an easy way to think of these two groups is like MI6 or the CIA working as a secret intelligence agency under one larger government. The CIA is to the US as Ghost is to Ego. Now next, Midas gets to work on setting up bases around the island. He builds the Grotto, an underground secret cave port. The Rig, an oil rig masked under the company of Spillex. The Shark, an island base located in the northwest section of the map. He then parks a small offensive battleship disguised as a yacht in the northeast section. And lastly, he creates the Agency, a centrally located intelligence and operations building designed for both defense and possible other secret plans. In doing this, Midas then sets his closest agents to oversee operations at these locations, giving him eyes in all four corners of the map. So, Season 2 of Fortnite starts with Midas deploying his units and Shadow beginning operations to undermine Ego. This starts with Alter continuing expansion and even trying to recruit members of Ego. And in Week 2, it works. Brutus joins Shadow. This will be the first crushing loss in a string of many for Midas and the Agency. Brutus then converts the Grotto to a shadow base and starts aiding his new allies. Next, Alter makes its plans to take control over the Rig. Next, fed up with Midas's leadership, Tiantina defects from the Agency as well and helps Shadow Forces move the Rig into the hands of Alter. The Ghost henchmen don't go down without a fight, however, and in the defense of the Rig, a gas container breaks and the Rig is heavily damaged in the resulting explosion. Losing both a strong asset and valued team member, this is another decimating loss for Midas. But is everything here exactly as we see it? Well, actually no, not at all. Midas is a super high-level player, and all of this was intentional. So while on the outside it seemed like Brutus left Midas, he was actually in fact becoming a double agent. Remember how this season is dedicated to spies? Well, that explains it right there. Alter was still too unpredictable, so Midas realized he needed to plant a mole. He had Ego mostly under control, but Alter could ruin his plans, so he had Brutus planted as a double agent, and Brutus would slip him information all throughout the season. This makes a lot of sense too, as it explains why we see Shadow Brutus sitting in the Agency in the trailer. It wasn't a mistake, but rather a huge hint that we all overlooked. And so Brutus then comes across a huge piece of information. He learned that Alter had plans to assault and take control of the Rig. When Midas heard this news, he realized his grasp over the Rig was minimal and that losing it was almost certain. And this is where we see the absolute genius of our Golden Man. Knowing it's already lost, he gets Tiantina to defect from his group and join Alter to work from the inside. Now, 2 members joining Shadow in a month sounds suspicious, so he has to ensure that Alter trusts her. He has Tiantina undermine the pre-defense strategies of the rig, moving Ghost members away to other bases, lowering security. By guaranteeing the securement of the rig, this establishes massive trust between Tiantina and Alter. But Midas knew it would also be a huge mistake to let Alter gain control of such a valuable asset. At this point, no matter what he does, he knows it's lost, but that doesn't mean Alter necessarily has to get it. So he adopts a policy known throughout history as Scorched Earth. Before the attack, Midas instructs Tiantina, the explosive specialist that she is, to rig up a bomb to go off during the assault. Alter attacks the base, the bomb goes off, and this makes the rig fundamentally useless. Now, it's brushed off as an accident in the fight, but in truth, everything was planned. In one fell swoop, Midas plants a second double agent into Alter and destroys a highly valuable asset which would have been otherwise lost to him anyway. And it's here where we see how Midas is a master player. And it's also around this time that Midas has Sky convert to Ego, creating the illusion that it's still an independent group and not an agency puppet. He then turns the shark into a prison to contain Oro, the god of gold, which is where he got his gold powers from in the first place. Now, despite his masterful efforts, the tide continues to turn against Midas. It seems he begins preparing for the worst, and he employs the help of someone very close to him, the engineer. A daughter, a sister, significant other, it's hard to say just who the engineer is, but she helps him create a doomsday device inside the agency. This is a highly secretive project which Midas cannot afford to let people know about. So in Midas's character trailer, we see a wall of masks of people who seemingly have been disposed of by Midas. We see AIM, an intelligence robot, the Astro Assassin, a highly skilled fighter, and also the Black Knight. Midas converts their helmet to gold, and we even see Lynx's helmet here. But Lynx was one of Midas's most trusted confidants, and they've been working together for over 5 seasons, so surely he would not just kill her. We also see the mask of the Kaos Agent, but it makes no sense that he would be dead either, as Alter continued successfully operating after this. Things do not add up here. What seems a lot more likely is not that these masks imply characters' deaths, but rather conversion. In the loading screen where Midas looks at his storm suit along with the engineer, a pair of glowing eyes can be seen in the reflection. And these eyes look just like the eye slits in Lynx's suit. Lynx is alive. Not only does this confirm Lynx to be alive, but also that she is still helping Midas. So maybe these masks signify characters Midas has converted to work for him and the agency. This would then also mean that the Kaos Agent is alive and in on Midas's grand scheme. But as the weeks progress, Alter continues to work against Ego, and it seems like Ego is doomed to fail. Eventually, Alter surrounds the agency, which now faces threat from all angles, and it looks like the end. After preparing for a final offensive, the Shadow Operative launches an attack on the agency. Both sides fight ferociously, but Alter isn't fast enough. During the battle for the agency, the Doomsday device continues to power up and it reaches full power. Finally, Midas activates it, delivering chaos to both the island and storyline. The agency explodes and his device emerges from within. A giant storm begins flooding the map and a monstrous wall of water surrounds the island. The map is flooded, and it is at this moment that everything we thought we knew about Fortnite changes. During the activation of the device, characters from the Fortnite universe experienced weird hallucinations. They saw an office, heard all sorts of panic, and even interacted with another entity. And so this is where everything gets complex. So as we've already known, there is a dimension beyond that of the Battle Royale Islands. The in-between existed exactly as that, a sort of buffer area between timelines and this other universe. But this now confirms the existence of another realm, a realm truly beyond Battle Royale, and it seems to be, in fact, the Save the World universe. See, our Fortnite characters ascended to another plane, and what they saw was actually the universe which hosts theirs. Photos on the wall can be seen with various Save the World characters, confirming this. And the office itself? Well, it's actually the administration branch of none other than VinderTech Labs. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come full circle. And so the question that seems to be on everyone's mind is Battle Royale a simulation? And the answer is sort of. While it is a simulation, it's not as simple as just being a computer program run by code. It's a simulation, but more than that. Now, if you don't follow Save the World at all you really need to know is that basically a giant storm that creates the zombies we see in Battle Royale came and ravaged their world. It basically follows a post-apocalyptic storyline from there. So it makes sense that this glimpse we got is before those events. VinderTech Labs is a huge tech company which literally changed their world, and they have technology to do almost anything. And here we see them operating. And so it seems like what's happening here is that one of their projects was a chaos theory simulation. They had thousands of computers running a giant multiverse level simulation, which is what contains the BR world. Except it's somehow so advanced and so real that there was a connection between these worlds deeper than code itself. And the characters within it were so advanced that they not only became self-aware, but one of them actually figured out the truth. Midas knew. He knew all along. And once again, it turns out that he was playing a deeper game than any of us could have foreseen. While Ego and Alter were squabbling in petty wars, he was planning. Was he Shadow or Ghost? Well, he was actually both. Midas was playing both sides of the field, using the conflict to his advantage as a distraction. See, Midas wanted this war to happen, to shift the focus of VinderTech away from his master plans. And it worked. Just like we ourselves thought, VinderTech believed that Midas was creating the device for the war. They wanted to study and observe what these simulated characters would do. But Midas fooled everyone. He wasn't making a weapon at all. He was making a gateway, a device to escape his fabricated prison. And everything almost worked. For brief moments, the characters in the Battle Royale world literally ascended into VinderTech Labs. They even talked with Agent Jonesy, a member of that world. But it wasn't enough. The device didn't work exactly as planned. It wasn't as strong, and they were only glimpses, ultimately being sent back to the Battle Royale island. VinderTech managed to contain the outbreak, and a giant flood swept over the map. And as for Midas, he was last seen stranded on a raft in the water, left to die as a self-aware simulation, watching helplessly as the rest of the island inhabitants forget and fall back into their loops. So, the Fortnite Chapter 2 storyline is on the surface level quite superficial, but when you look deeper, we see a lot more. It takes the multi-dimensional type themes of a show like Rick and Morty and mixes them with Westworld, a show about AI becoming self-aware and trying to overthrow their creators. Moving forward, it's going to be very interesting to see what comes next. While Midas may not be dead, I don't imagine we will ever see him on screen again. But all hope is not lost for our Battle Royale characters. Jules, the engineer, and Lynx also knew Midas' secrets, and they may continue to try and escape. Whether they'll follow Midas' plan or start their own, it's hard to say. Jules has taken control over the agency, turning it into the Authority, and now leads Alter and maybe even Ego. Jules is an engineering genius, and it's very likely she's not done just yet. But as for what she plans, time will tell. All of that and more will be revealed in part 3 of the entire Fortnite storyline you didn't know explained. So this was a really big project, and it probably took over 30 hours to create. And so I just wanted to take a second to thank you guys for all the support. If you're here for the giveaway, we're going to be giving away 10 1,000 V-Buck codes for the Battle Pass. To enter, we just ask that you subscribe to the channel and then in, say, 8 sentences or less, explain your thoughts and theories on the storyline. Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you in a few seasons.